First, start by cutting out your fabrics. Follow the instructions in the pattern to cut 2 top panels, 2 bottom panels, 2 pieces of fleece batting, 2 lining pieces, 1 strap connector, and 2 zipper tabs. You'll also need a 7.5-inch zipper, a piece of fabric for your key fob, a piece of key fob hardware, and a piece of fabric for a tassel and tassel cap hardware. Grab a pair of scissors, a spool of polyester thread, a pair of pliers, permanent glue, a small screwdriver, and some wonder clips. With the wrong sides together, place your top panels over 1 piece of fleece batting. Use sewing clips to hold the layers together. Then sew around the outside edges with an 1/8-inch seam allowance. After sewing, take 1 bottom panel and place it right sides together with each top panel, aligning the long edges. Clip in place. Then sew together with 3/8-inch seam allowance. Next, fold the top panel away from the bottom panel with the seam pressed towards the top. Then top stitch the top panel 1/8 inch from the seam. Now we're going to create the darts. With right sides together, match the adjacent straight edges of 1 dart and sew along the straight edge with an 1/8 inch seam allowance. Repeat for the remaining darts on each bottom panel. Here's what each of your pieces should look like now that they're sewn together. Next, take your strap connector piece. With wrong sides together, fold the short edges to the middle, then fold in half again so the raw edges are tucked inside. Top stitch from each of the long edges with an 1/8 inch seam allowance. After sewing, thread the connector through the split ring on the key fob hardware and fold in half, matching the raw edges. Measure 1 inch down from the top edge of your front piece and clip the strap connector with the raw edges together. The hardware should be towards the inside. Make sure the folded edge of the connector is parallel with the top edge of the bag. Then sew the connector in place 1/8 inch from the edge. Next, we're going to prepare the zipper. Take both of your zipper tab pieces and, just like before, fold the short raw edges to the center, but this time place the zipper against the middle of the tab and then fold the tab in half to encase the raw end. Top stitch the tab in place with an 1/8 inch seam allowance and repeat to attach the opposite tab. Take one of your lining pieces and create the darts just like before, but this time you're going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance on each of the lining darts. Trim the sides of the zipper tabs even with the zipper tape. Take your front piece and center the zipper with right sides together. Take one lining piece and place it right sides together with the front, aligning the top edges. Use some wonder clips to hold it in place. Sew together with 3/8 inch seam allowance. I recommend using a zipper foot or a narrow foot for this step. Make sure you move your zipper pull out of the way and watch out for that key fob hardware. Next, fold the lining and front away from the zipper so they are wrong sides together. Then top stitch 1/8 inch from the seam. Now center your zipper right sides together with the back piece. Take the remaining lining piece and place it right sides together with the attached lining. Use wonder clips to hold together, then sew with 3/8 inch seam allowance. Again, make sure to watch out for the zipper pull and key fob hardware. Next, fold the lining and back away from the zipper and top stitch an 1/8 inch from the seam. It's easier to do this with the zipper closed. Here's what your wristlet should look like so far. Unzip the zipper about halfway. Match the front and back pieces, then also match the lining pieces with right sides together. Make sure the seams and darts are even. To help reduce bulk, press the seam of each dart in opposite directions. Use wonder clips to hold the pieces together and repeat to clip the lining. After clipping, start by sewing the lining together with 3/8 inch seam allowance. As you reach the zipper seam, reduce your seam allowance to a 1/4 inch. Sew around the front and back, then increase back to 3/8 inch seam allowance once you reach the lining again. Make sure you leave about 4 inches unsewn in the lining so you can turn your bag right side out later. Trim the lining seam allowance to 1/8 inch wide, but do not trim the seam allowance of the unsewn area. Make small snips along the curves of the front and back to help relax the seam. Just be careful not to cut through your stitches. Now you're ready to turn your bag right side out. Use your fingers to smooth out the corners and push out the zipper tabs. Tuck the raw edges of the turning hole inside the bag and top stitch the turning hole closed with 1/8 inch seam allowance. After top stitching, push the lining inside your bag and we'll move on to the finishing touches. One tip to help keep the shape of your bag is to roll the seams with your fingers and use wonder clips around the curves. Let the bag sit a few hours and then remove the clips. To make the strap, you have two options. Either fold the strap in half lengthwise with wrong sides together and top stitch each side of the strap with an 1/8 inch seam allowance, or you can fold each length side to the center with wrong sides together and top stitch each side of the strap with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. It just depends on the look you want, but either way you don't have to worry about the fabric fraying, so it can be left raw edge. I'm just going to fold my strap in half to make it easy. After sewing, fold the strap in half. Make sure the folded edge is towards the top and the raw edges are towards the bottom. Insert the raw ends into the key fob hardware. Place a scrap of batting over the hardware to protect it from getting scratched and clamp the hardware in place. The last step is to make the tassel. Start by measuring a 1/2 inch down from the short edge and mark across. Cut the fringe from the bottom up to the marked line a 1/4 inch apart. Add a generous amount of glue to the inside of the tassel cap. Tightly roll the top edge of the tassel, then push it into the cap. Take the very small screw that came with the hardware and screw the tassel in place. Then you can clip it to the ring on your bag and your wristlet is complete.